He called me just a glorified note-taker in front of the whole team. Too bad the note I took that day led to the unraveling of his $18 million lie. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer mine delivered at dawn on a Monday morning, right when the IPO pitch begins. Brandon Kells thought I was invisible, just another piece of office furniture he could discard. He was about to learn that the most dangerous person in any company is the one who knows where all the bodies are buried and kept the receipts. My name is Rachel Lynn Brewster, and for 15 years, I was the invisible backbone of Vault Sync Systems. At 42, I'd spent more than a third of my life keeping this company running, though you'd never know it from looking at the org chart. My official title was Internal Operations Director, but that was just corporate speak for the person who fixes everything no one else wants to touch. I wasn't one of those polished executives who breezed through Wharton or Stanford. My degree came from a state school, paid for with night shifts at a warehouse and student loans I'd finally paid off 3 years ago. I didn't wear designer suits or carry bags that cost more than most people's rent. My wardrobe consisted of practical blazers from Target and comfortable flats that could survive 18-hour days. But I knew this company inside and out. Every system, every process, every contract had my fingerprints on it somewhere. When the servers crashed at 3:15 a.m. on Christmas Eve, I was the one who drove through a blizzard to fix them. When a major client threatened to walk because of a billing error, I was the one who spent 48 hours straight untangling 5 years of invoices. When the original CFO had a heart attack and left us with a regulatory nightmare, I was the one who learned tax code on the fly and kept us out of federal prison. I'd been here since the beginning, back when Vault Sync was just 5 guys in a converted garage, dreaming of revolutionizing data storage. I'd watched us grow from a startup surviving on ramen and hoped to a company worth hundreds of millions, through 3 CEOs, 2 acquisitions attempts, and 1 near bankruptcy. I'd been the constant. The other executives called me only when something was on fire. Otherwise, I was furniture, reliable, functional, and utterly forgettable. They'd walk past me in the halls without acknowledgement, discuss strategic decisions in meetings where I took notes but wasn't invited to contribute. I was the keeper of institutional knowledge that everyone needed but no one respected. That started to change 6 months ago when the board brought in Brandon Kells as our new CEO, Harvard MBA, former McKinsey consultant, the kind of guy who used synergy unironically and believed every problem could be solved with a PowerPoint deck. He swept in with promises of taking us public, of making Vault Sync a household name. His first move was bringing in his own people. Out went the old guard who'd built this company with their bare hands. In came a parade of consultants and transformation specialists who couldn't find the bathroom without a process map. The new CFO, Graham Reese, was Brandon's old fraternity brother, another Ivy League prince who looked at spreadsheets the way normal people looked at abstract art. I watched as they systematically erased the contributions of everyone who'd been here before them. The company history on our website was rewritten. The About Us page now started with Brandon's arrival, as if the previous 15 years hadn't existed. My name disappeared from project credits. Systems I'd built from scratch were suddenly attributed to the leadership team. But I kept my head down and did my work. I'd survived worse. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit as long as the company thrived. I was wrong, but it would take public humiliation to finally open my eyes to just how wrong I'd been. The quarterly all-hands meeting was scheduled for 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in March. I'd prepared my usual stack of backup documents, the real numbers behind the glossy presentations, the context that marketing spin always conveniently forgot. Brandon stood at the front of our main conference room, clicking through slides about our explosive growth trajectory and market domination strategy. I sat in my usual spot, 3 rows back, watching the numbers flash by. Something was wrong. The revenue projections for Q4 didn't match what I'd seen in the actual system reports. We were showing a 32% increase in enterprise contracts, but I'd processed those contracts myself. The real growth was maybe 12%. Respectable, but not the hockey stick graph Brandon was selling. I raised my hand. Brandon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he nodded in my direction with the fake smile he'd perfected for investor calls. Yes, Rachel. I think there might be an error in the Q4 enterprise numbers. The system shows... The system shows exactly what's on this slide, he interrupted, his voice taking on that patronizing tone men like him had perfected over centuries of boardrooms. These numbers have been thoroughly vetted by our finance team. But I processed those contracts personally. The Meridian deal was worth $2.3 million, not $3.8, and the Cornerstone renewal. Why are you still talking? The words cut through the room like a blade. The fake smile was gone now, replaced by something colder. You're not even client-facing. You're just a glorified note-taker. The room went silent. 63 people held their breath. I felt my face burn, not with embarrassment, but with a rage so pure it made my hands shake. Someone in the back coughed nervously. A few people shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Now, Brandon continued, turning back to his presentation as if he hadn't just eviscerated me in front of the entire company. As I was saying about our market position, I didn't hear the rest. Blood pounded in my ears as I stared at my laptop screen. Fingers frozen over the keyboard. Glorified note-taker. After 15 years of building this company's infrastructure with my bare hands, after countless nights and weekends sacrificed to keep us afloat, I was just a glorified note-taker. The meeting ended at 4:15 p.m. People filed out, carefully avoiding eye contact with me. A few sympathetic glances, maybe, but no one said a word. Lisa from marketing squeezed my shoulder as she passed, but that was it. In the corporate world, public execution was a spectator sport, not a team event. I stayed in my seat until the room emptied, staring at those fraudulent numbers still glowing on the abandoned projection screen. 2.3 million inflated to 3.8, a 40% markup. That wasn't a rounding error or aggressive accounting. That was a lie. And it wasn't the only one. As I sat there in the empty conference room, my mind started connecting dots I'd been too loyal to see before. The new equipment expenses that never resulted in actual equipment. The consulting fees paid to companies I'd never heard of. The way Graham always handled certain invoices personally, bypassing the normal approval process. I opened my laptop and pulled up the contract database I'd built 5 years ago. My fingers moved on autopilot, cross-referencing numbers, tracking payments, following paper trails. The Meridian deal was just the tip of the iceberg. Contract after contract had been inflated, some by 20%, others by 50%, all approved by Graham, all presented to the board by Brandon. By 6:45 p.m., the office was nearly empty. I printed everything, not on the main printer where documents were logged, but on the old inkjet in the supply closet that IT had forgotten to decommission. 67 pages of evidence that our leadership was cooking the books. I tucked the papers into my bag and walked to my car in the gathering darkness. My hands were steady now. The rage had crystallized into something harder, colder. They thought I was just a glorified note-taker, fine. But they'd forgotten one crucial thing about note-takers. We write everything down. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2:47 a.m., I gave up and drove back to the office. The building was empty except for the security guard who barely looked up from his phone as I badged in. One of the perks of being invisible, nobody questions why you're there. My desk was exactly as I'd left it, but now I saw it differently. The ancient computer tower humming beneath my desk wasn't just outdated equipment they'd never bothered to upgrade. It was a time capsule. When Brandon and Graham had mandated the move to cloud-based solutions 6 months ago, I'd been tasked with the migration. But old habits die hard, and I'd kept local backups of everything. Call it paranoia or call it foresight. 15 years in corporate America teaches you that data has a funny way of disappearing when it becomes inconvenient. I pulled out the external drive I'd tucked behind the tower, buried beneath a nest of cables and dust bunnies. 4 terabytes of history that I didn't even know existed. My personal insurance policy, though I'd never thought of it that way until now. The files were all there, organized with the obsessive attention to detail that made me so good at my job and so easy to dismiss. Folders within folders, dated and cross-referenced. I started with the tax documents from last year. Graham had handled them personally, cutting me out of the process for the first time since I'd started. Streamlining operations, he'd called it. At 3:22 a.m., I found the first smoking gun, a line item for strategic infrastructure investment, $18.3 million. The description was vague enough to pass a casual audit, but I knew every piece of equipment we'd purchased in the last 5 years. We hadn't spent anything close to that amount. I dug deeper. The payment had gone to a company called Pinnacle Solutions, LLC. I'd never heard of them, which was impossible. I processed every vendor contract. A quick search in the state business registry made my blood run cold. Pinnacle Solutions had been incorporated just 2 weeks before the payment. The registered agent Graham's personal attorney. The rabbit hole went deeper. Invoices from Pinnacle for consulting services that never happened. Equipment purchases for servers that didn't exist. Maintenance contracts for systems we didn't own. And every single one approved by Graham. Countersigned by Brandon. By 5:15 a.m., I'd mapped out the entire scheme. $18 million siphoned off through a shell company, hidden in plain sight among legitimate expenses. The inflated revenue numbers in yesterday's presentation weren't about impressing investors. They were about covering the hole in our balance sheet. I copied everything to 3 separate drives, one for me, one for safekeeping, and one for what came next. As the sun rose over Denver's skyline, painting the mountains pink and gold, I sat back in my chair and laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in months. They'd made 2 critical mistakes. First, they'd assumed I was too stupid to notice. Second, they'd forgotten that I'd been here long before them, and I'd learned from the best. Our original CFO, the one who'd had the heart attack. Before he left, he'd pulled me aside and given me advice I'd never forgotten. Always keep copies. Rachel, always. The day you need them is the day they'll already be deleted. I locked the drives in my desk drawer and went to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. In the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in years. Not the dutiful employee who accepted disrespect as the price of a steady paycheck. Not the invisible woman who kept her head down and her mouth shut. I saw the woman who'd helped build this company from nothing. The woman who'd saved us from bankruptcy. Who'd weathered every crisis. Who knew where every body was buried because she'd helped dig the graves. Brandon thought I was just a glorified note-taker. He was about to learn that sometimes the pen really is mightier than the sword, especially when that pen has been documenting $18 million worth of federal crimes. The email arrived at 4:57 p.m. on Thursday, 3 minutes before I was planning to leave. The subject line read, "Restructure pathways. Corporate speak for, you're about to get screwed." The sender was Diane from HR. Brandon's latest import, a woman who smiled like a shark and had the emotional range of a spreadsheet. "Hi, Rachel. We need to discuss some exciting changes regarding your role. Please join us in Conference Room B tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thanks, Diane." Exciting changes. In 15 years, I'd learned that exciting was HR code for devastating. I stared at the email, a strange calm settling over me. They were moving faster than I'd expected. The quarterly meeting humiliation hadn't been spontaneous. It had been the opening move in a chess game I hadn't realized we were playing. That night, I called Marcia Volkov, my old friend from college who'd gone into corporate law. We hadn't talked in months, but she picked up on the second ring. "Rachel Christ, what time is it in Denver?" 8:43 p.m. "Sorry, I know it's late in Boston." No, it's fine. You sound different. What's wrong?" I told her everything. The public humiliation, the cooked books, the shell company, the impending HR ambush. Marcia listened without interrupting, occasionally making small noises that might have been sympathy or might have been her taking notes. "Send me everything," she said when I finished. "Tonight, use my personal email, not the firm account. And Rachel, whatever they offer you tomorrow, don't sign anything, not a goddamn thing." The next morning, I dressed carefully, not in my usual practical blazer, but in the one good suit I owned, charcoal gray, purchased for the funeral of our original founder 5 years ago. If they were going to execute me, I'd face the firing squad with dignity. Conference Room B was the smallest meeting room, tucked away on the second floor where the old accounting department used to be. The message was clear: you're not worth the good conference room anymore. Diane was already there, flanked by Brandon and a man I didn't recognize, outside counsel, judging by the expensive suit and vulture eyes. "Rachel, thanks for joining us," Diane chirped, as if I'd had a choice. "Please have a seat." I sat. The folder in front of Diane was thick. They'd done their homework. "As you know," Brandon began, not quite meeting my eyes, VaultSync is entering an exciting new phase. We're streamlining operations to prepare for our IPO. Streamlining, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? The lawyer shifted slightly. Diane's smile flickered. Your position, while valuable in our startup phase, has become redundant, Brandon continued. We're prepared to offer you a generous severance package, 2-month salary, continuation of health benefits through the end of the quarter, and a positive reference for your future endeavors. Diane slid a document across the table, 20 pages of legal text, but I only needed to see one phrase, comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, the lawyer spoke for the first time. You'll agree to return all company property, delete any files or documents in your possession, and maintain strict confidentiality about all aspects of your employment here. I picked up the document, pretending to read it while my mind raced. They weren't just firing me, they were trying to silence me, which meant they knew I knew something, but they didn't know how much. This is very generous, I said finally, setting the papers down, but I'll need time to review this with my attorney. Attorney, Diane's voice pitched higher. Rachel, this is a standard severance agreement. There's really no need. You'll get all the company property back, I interrupted, echoing the words I'd rehearsed. Every single piece. Brandon's face went pale. The lawyer leaned forward. What exactly does that mean? I stood up, smoothing my funeral suit. It means I take my fiduciary responsibilities very seriously. Always have. I'll need the weekend to conduct a thorough inventory of all company materials in my possession. I want to make sure everything is properly documented and returned. After all, I looked directly at Brandon. I'm not just a glorified note-taker. I'm the person who knows where everything is filed. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. They knew I knew. I knew they knew I knew. But nobody was ready to say it out loud. Not yet. Monday morning, I said, heading for the door. You'll have my response by Monday morning. As I walked out, I heard Diane whisper urgently to Brandon. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The game was on, and they'd just realized I wasn't playing by their rules. In the parking lot, I texted Marcia. They tried to buy my silence. How much is $18 million worth of fraud worth to the SEC? Her response was immediate. More than they can afford. Don't go home. Meet me at the airport. We have work to do. Marcia's flight landed at 11:23 p.m. I waited at the arrivals gate, clutching a coffee that had gone cold hours ago. When she emerged, pulling a small carry-on, she looked exactly as she had in law school. Sharp, focused, and ready for war. You look like hell, she said, hugging me briefly. When's the last time you slept? Tuesday, I think. Jesus, Rachel, come on. I booked us a hotel suite near the airport. We need to go through everything tonight. The suite was sterile and anonymous, perfect for what we were about to do. I'd brought all 3 drives, plus the printed documents. Marcia had brought something more valuable, 15 years of experience in corporate fraud litigation. We worked through the night, building our case piece by piece. Marcia's legal pad filled with notes, diagrams, timelines. She made me walk through every transaction, every email, every suspicious approval. This is good, she said around 3:15 a.m., tapping the Pinnacle Solutions Incorporation documents. But we need more. The SEC gets hundreds of whistleblower complaints every month. Most of them go nowhere. We need something that makes them sit up and pay attention. What about the tax filings? I pulled up the files on my laptop. Graham filed amended returns last year, right after Brandon came on board. Look at this. They retroactively created deductions for equipment purchases that predate Pinnacle Solutions by 6 months. Marcia's eyes lit up. Tax fraud. That's FBI territory. Keep going. By dawn, we had mapped out the entire conspiracy. It was bigger than I'd initially thought. The $18 million wasn't just embezzlement. It was part of a systematic inflation of company value ahead of the IPO. They were planning to take VaultSync public with fraudulent financials, potentially defrauding investors out of hundreds of millions. They must have known the original CFO would have caught this, Marcia mused, reviewing the timeline. His heart attack was convenient timing. You think they... No, I'm not suggesting murder, but I bet they were relieved when he left. And when they realized you were the only other person who understood the finances well enough to spot the fraud. They decided to humiliate me into quitting, I finished the thought. Make me too emotional to think clearly, too wounded to fight back. Except they picked the wrong person to underestimate. Marcia started organizing the documents into categories. We need to file this properly. 1 copy to the SEC's Office of Whistleblower, 1 to the FBI's White Collar Crime Division, 1 to the Colorado Attorney General, and we need to do it simultaneously, so they can't bury it. What about my job? The NDA they want me to sign. You haven't signed anything yet, and whistleblower protections supersede any NDA. They fire you after this, that's retaliation. They'll owe you a lot more than 2 months severance. She paused, studying my face. You sure you want to do this? Once we file, there's no going back. Your name will be sealed in the complaints, but Brandon and Graham will know it was you. I thought about 15 years of loyalty rewarded with contempt, about every night I'd worked late while they took credit, about standing in that conference room, being called a glorified note-taker by a man who was stealing millions. I'm sure. We spent Saturday preparing the formal complaints. Marcia was meticulous, crafting each filing to highlight the most damaging evidence. The SEC complaint focused on the investor fraud angle. The FBI filing emphasized the tax evasion and wire fraud. The state complaint covered the corporate governance violations. The beauty of this, Marcia explained, is that each agency will want to claim jurisdiction. They'll all investigate simultaneously. Brandon and Graham won't know which way to turn. By Sunday night, everything was ready. 3 comprehensive whistleblower complaints, each with hundreds of pages of supporting documentation. Marcia had even prepared a media packet, though we'd hold that in reserve. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, she said. That's when we file. All 3 agencies have online portals. The submissions will be time-stamped before Brandon even gets to the office. And my response to the severance offer? Marcia smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Oh, I've prepared something special for that. They want to buy your silence for 2 months' salary. They're about to learn what your knowledge is really worth. I looked at the stack of evidence we'd assembled. Financial records, emails, incorporation documents, tax filings, $18 million worth of fraud, documented in excruciating detail by a glorified note-taker who'd been taking notes on more than they'd ever imagined. Hey, Marcia. Thank you, for dropping everything, for flying out here, for... Rachel, stop. They fucked with my friend. My brilliant, dedicated friend who saved that company a dozen times over. Besides, her smile turned predatory. I haven't had this much fun since I took down that pharmaceutical CEO last year. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow, we burn it all down. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. One of those perfect Denver days where the mountains seem close enough to touch. I sat in Marcia's rental car outside a coffee shop, laptop open, watching the clock tick toward 8 a.m. Ready? Marcia asked, her fingers poised over her own keyboard. Ready. At exactly 8 a.m. Mountain Time, we hit submit on all 3 whistleblower portals. The SEC's system confirmed receipt immediately. The FBI's took a bit longer, grinding through the massive file upload. The state portal was last, completing at 8:07 a.m. Now for the fun part, Marcia said, pulling up her email. Brandon's IPO presentation was scheduled for 9:30 a.m. The investor group included 2 major venture capital firms and a handful of high-net-worth individuals. Combined, they were prepared to pump $300 million into VaultSync based on fraudulent financials. At 8:22 a.m., Marcia sent the email. The recipients included Brandon, Graham, Diane from HR, the entire board of directors, and, crucially, the company's internal legal team. Subject irregularities in capital expenditures. Evidence enclosed. Dear VaultSync Leadership Team, please find attached documentation regarding significant financial irregularities totaling approximately $18 million in misallocated funds. These documents have been provided to relevant regulatory authorities for investigation. Specifically, creation of shell company, Pinnacle Solutions LLC, for fraudulent invoicing, systematic inflation of contract values in financial reporting, material misrepresentations in tax filings for fiscal years 2023 to 2024, Conspiracy to defraud potential investors through false IPO documentation. As Internal Operations Director, I have fiduciary duty to report these violations. Whistleblower complaints have been filed with the SEC reference, redacted, FBI White Collar Crime Division case, redacted, and Colorado Attorney General's office complaint, redacted. Any attempts at retaliation will be documented and reported to the appropriate authorities. Respectfully, Rachel Lynn Brewster. C.C. Marcia Volkoff, Esquo, Volkoff and Associates, Counsel for Ms. Brewster. You didn't include the actual reference numbers, I noted. Of course not. Let them sweat wondering if we really filed or if we're bluffing. By the time they figure out we're not, the agencies will already be calling. My phone started buzzing at 8:26 a.m. Brandon. I let it go to voicemail, then Graham, then Diane, then a number I didn't recognize, probably their lawyer. Don't answer any of them, Marcia advised. All communication goes through me now. At 8:41 a.m., my company email access was revoked. At 8:45 a.m., my keycard was deactivated. They were moving fast, but not fast enough. Check the news, Marcia said suddenly, pointing at her phone. I pulled up Business Circuit Weekly's website. There it was, posted at 8:50 a.m. Breaking Vault Sync Systems IPO, postponed amid fraud allegations. How did they? Anonymous tip, Marcia said innocently. Funny how these things happen. By 9:15 a.m., the parking lot of Vault Sync's headquarters was chaos. I watched via the security camera feed I could still access through an old back door. Another thing it had forgotten about. Employees clustered in confused groups. Several black SUVs with government plates pulled up to the front entrance. FBI works fast when there's tax fraud involved, Marcia observed. Brandon's presentation was supposed to start in 15 minutes. Instead of pitching to investors, he was probably huddled with lawyers, trying to figure out how to contain the damage. But you can't contain an $18 million fraud once the feds start looking. It's like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. My personal phone rang, a blocked number. Answer it, Marcia said. On speaker? Rachel. Brandon's voice was different now. No condescension, no corporate polish, just raw panic. Rachel, we need to talk. All communication goes through my attorney, I said calmly. Marcia Volkoff, you have her contact information. Rachel, please, this is all a misunderstanding. If you just come in, we can sort this out. The severance package. We can revisit the terms. Be more generous. Brandon, I said, savoring his name like wine. I'm just a glorified note-taker. Remember, what could I possibly know that would worry you? The silence on the other end was delicious. You've destroyed everything, he finally whispered. The IPO. The company. Hundreds of jobs. No, I cut him off. You destroyed it the moment you and Graham decided to steal $18 million. I just took notes. Very detailed notes. I hung up. Marcia was grinning. Feel better? Yeah, I admitted. I really do. By noon, Vault Sync's stock price had dropped 40%. By 3 p.m., Graham Reese had deleted all his social media accounts. By 5 p.m., the FBI had seized boxes of documents from the executive floor. And somewhere in Denver, a glorified note-taker sat with her lawyer, watching an empire built on lies crumble with a few well-placed keystrokes. They'd been right about one thing. I wasn't client-facing. I was something far more dangerous. I was detail-oriented, and I'd kept the receipts. The unraveling happened faster than anyone could have predicted. By Tuesday morning, Vault Sync had hired a crisis management firm, but it was like trying to bail out the Titanic with a coffee cup. The damage was done, and it was spectacular. I watched it all from my apartment, fielding calls from Marcia and refreshing news sites obsessively. Former colleagues texted me throughout the day, some supportive, others fishing for information. I responded to none of them. Wednesday brought the first official announcement. Vault Sync Systems Board of Directors announces immediate suspension of CEO Brandon Kell's pending investigation. The carefully worded press release couldn't hide the panic. They threw around phrases like, taking allegations seriously, and committed to transparency. But everyone knew what it really meant. Brandon was done. Graham lasted until Thursday. His resignation letter, leaked to the press within hours, was a masterpiece of deflection. He cited personal reasons and the need to focus on family during this difficult time. No mention of the shell company registered in his lawyer's name. No acknowledgement of the $18 million that had vanished into Pinnacle Solutions' phantom accounts. Coward couldn't even face the music, Marcia said during our morning check-in call. His lawyer contacted me yesterday. They want to negotiate. Negotiate what? A deal. Graham provides full cooperation against Brandon in exchange for reduced charges. Apparently, our former CEO was the mastermind while poor Graham was just following orders. I laughed, genuinely amused for the first time in weeks. Graham created that shell company before Brandon even interviewed for the CEO position. I have the incorporation documents to prove it, which I've already shared with the FBI. Graham's lawyer went very quiet after that. By Friday, the exodus began. The entire finance department was placed on administrative leave. The head of HR, Diane of the Shark Smile, resigned to pursue other opportunities. The board announced they were bringing in an independent auditing firm to review 5 years of financial records. But the real bombshell dropped the following Monday. Business Circuit Weekly ran an exclusive that made my phone explode with notifications. Ex-employee exposes $18 million fraud at Vault Sync. Whistleblower remains anonymous. The article was devastating. They'd somehow gotten details about Pinnacle Solutions, the inflated contracts, even the tax fraud. They didn't name me. Whistleblower protections held. But anyone who'd been at that quarterly meeting knew exactly who'd pulled the trigger. My LinkedIn inbox filled with messages. Recruiters who'd ignored me for years suddenly found me impressive and exactly what our clients are looking for. Former colleagues reached out with variations of, "I always knew something was off," and "I'm so sorry about what Brandon said to you." Tuesday afternoon. As I was packing up my apartment for the move to Arizona, my phone rang. A Denver number I recognized. Sam Hutchinson, one of the original founders who still sat on the board. "Hello, Sam?" "Rachel." His voice was tired, older than I remembered. "I owe you an apology. We all do. We should have listened, should have valued what you brought to the company." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have. The board wants to offer you a position. Chief Compliance Officer, full C-suite compensation, stock options. You'd report directly to the board. Help us clean up this mess." 5 weeks ago, I would have jumped at the chance. C-suite. The recognition I'd craved for 15 years. But now,